Okay, we have, tomorrow we've got, the safety commission, the license coming in. There's, like the hurricane on what's happening with the dispatch committee. And also what's happening with the $9 million that was raised by a targeted fund and it went to them. But some people seem to think it's money that we control. It doesn't sound like it is, but we will. But one place it could have gone was to dispatch. Health insurance coverage for obesity care. That's just, we'll have Jim Carvey come in next week. Does anybody, I'm trying to get a sense as to how close we are to voting these things out. We don't have many bills this year. I'm gonna have, Representative Kornheiser come in next week and tell us what the House is doing on the property tax issue. As she explained it, they have removed the cap on everything and they're still figuring out the bottom quartile or quintile, but there's 5 or 6 schools that are really Champlain Valley, they're losing a payment for like 300 students. That's on there. And so they're gonna put something back in there. And then I'm not clear exactly where they're going from there.
Champlain Valley's
Champlain-
paper.
The Union High School District is one of the big losers.
It's one of my grandchildren will call. Is that because of the waiver?
Yeah, yeah, They are.
They're losing students on paper.
yeah, they're losing students on paper. That's some of the big ones. Saying I still haven't gotten coffee. I know you found it, the bill isn't left here. But we didn't have that 5%.
So I did not find the language surrounding the 5%. There was a slightly different mechanism, but I didn't know exactly
Okay,
what part
what
you wanted.
it said is that if the loss or the addition of payments was paid in over 5 years, it was rolling, you took 5% loss or gain in 5, or and after 5 years, if the impact was more than 5%. I think we're gonna deal with that when we got there. But, so I'm gonna have them, because eventually it's coming here. And they're talking about allowing schools to delay their vote when we do that. I've been told that the school construction study is out, it is, the needs, there's ranges from $5 to $6 billion that people think it costs. That is not just school dust, but I think it would help the schools if we could say to them, because a lot seem to be spending money on just delayed maintenance. If we could say to them that the study's now in, we can't put this off any longer, we are going to find you some relief there. Maybe we'll bond for that rather than in prison, but so we're gonna get, if we can find out who has it, we're gonna get that report brought to us. They said they reported it to us on the 1st. We haven't seen it. So we'll do that next week. And okay, yeah, we'll do that charitable contribution. I'll ask the tax department to come in and tell us what they think that impact will be, and then we can either vote that up or just leave it sitting on the wall. That's this. I think we are going to vote out 180 this week. Community media, I assume we should set up some discussion about a franchise tax or tax on streaming services. And and we'll get somebody from Jordan Fiscal to see if they can talk to us about what that might look like and what it, what they gave. I would prefer, I think, to do that, since it's moving us further ahead in where technology's going. And I'm really afraid that if we start funding programs by pole attachment fees, that we're gonna see a whole lot. As I said before, I learned that lesson with the parking or traffic ticket fees, so we got it up to about $200.
Yes. No, listen, that's all, sorry.
Okay. So I'm looking for you to tell me who you would like to hear from before you're ready to vote. The big one, which I don't think we made, not sure. Have we had the drafters go through the Medicare Medicaid Advantage bill? I don't think we did. You remember saying, did we have the draft to go over? I guess it's 230, the Medicare Advantage plan.
Check previous agenda.
Okay,
That's Senator Harrison.
that's Senator Harrison's bill. I'm trying to remember what she did to them, so I think she just came in and gave us her reasons for doing it.
Was it to exclude state employees, though?
No, but this, it said, yes, I think that one does say that the state employees can't.
Yeah.
Now, we fought it last year when we said the state could impose it.
Right.
But I'm not comfortable with
It's
telling
like
them,
they're
even if I
not
think it's stupid, they can't do it. No, there are issues with being, if you go out on an Advantage plan and you move and your closest doctor and dentist that are in the plan are 50 miles away, if you decide, you know, I've got false teeth now, I don't need dental services. There's problems either in getting, there's a cost to get back into Medicare. And somewhere else, I was told, you can't get into Medicare Part B, so you lose all that other coverage that Medicare doesn't cover,
The
the Part B, is it?
is hospitalization. So
I
just
thought Medicare was.
hospitalization. And B is the prescription drug medication. It's, and
No, they,
then you need supplemental.
Yeah.
For that.
well, you can't get into the supplement program. So, and, yeah, these things are being sold by former TV and sports stars. And they're really hyped, at least for the months of October and November when the sign up date is coming. And so we'll, that one will take us a little while. I want to get a sense of 30 VSA 248. I got an email from somebody on, I think it's Rev, but they want a rebuttal witness to Allison. So I will give them a rebuttal witness. I told them to contact you. I will find that email and send it to you, and you can contact them. But once we've been through that, I don't know who else you want to hear from before we have to make some pretty hard decisions. And there's been some good arguments on both sides. So that's one I think we've done as much as we can. It can just sit in the wall if you don't want to vote on it, but
The two cases that both sides seem to focus on, was it? Going blank.
Manchester.
one was Manchester,
Manchester, but what was the other one?
down in Bradford,
Thank you.
the quick stop.
So if I didn't think them, they were all that compelling for arguing the case in general, like the Bradford one was an odd one, right? Wasn't,
That was just the town plan, they run water and sewer out there, they wanted some development, and it's a very limited little spot. And they didn't want a solar array taking it up because it doesn't use, so it went to a field.
right, so was it clear to me that the aesthetic, misapplying the aesthetic criterion was like a. Like, oh, this is a clear case that helps make the point that it's being overly applied or something. Then the Manchester one, honestly, it felt as though. If you could reasonably understand both points of view,
Yeah.
you lived there. It would be a big change, see a field full of arrays and. Some people would say, well, they're beautiful, it's part of the future, I get that. But for people who live there, that may not be the same.
And screening, I mean, you could put up a cedar hedge and you wouldn't see anything in 5 years, I mean. And that was, the pictures 5 years later were a little fence and a 5 foot high tree. It, yeah. And not seeing that in context, they all had the same picture. Looks like, sure, that's a perfect place until you see what's across the street.
And so I know it's about the criterion fund. It also just seemed like a complicated site in terms of it flooded.
Yep.
Ice got swept through, whatever. So it just, neither case seemed particularly clear to me, like, oh, here's purely aesthetic decision being made.
Yeah.
And therefore, we see that they're generally over applying. And the other thing I did hear that would be helpful is how many permits are granted in total? How many are rejected? And how many are rejected on the basis of aesthetics? Like, I don't know
Rick
if this
Baker said when he was here that the Manchester project, that was aesthetics, and he may be the hearing officer, maybe there's 2 or 3. But he said that is the only one he can remember, and he's been there for well over 20 years, that was rejected purely on aesthetics.
So then, that suggests it's not really a big problem. Obviously, for some people, they're motivated enough to put a bill in. I don't know if they know or see that I haven't seen in estimate.
Well, what I was hearing, I think yesterday, is you've got aesthetics, public safety, and traffic. Well, unless somebody finds some radio waves or, alien waves coming off of those things, as far as we know, there is no public health safety risk there. There might be traffic when they're going up, but that's temporary, so those are really not. The one place that the average person can hook on, the one way to get into the process is to complain because I don't want to see it out of my backyard and it's blocking my view of Mount Mansfield. But they don't usually win on that criteria, but what it does is it slows down the process. It is a pain in the ass for the developers, and if they could get rid of that pain, it would be smooth sailing. My concern is, I haven't seen the one on Route 7, but it's been talked about a lot, and the reason it is because the 3 power line is there. If there's only 2 criteria to intervene on, I think we'll see more right on the 3-phase power because it's cheaper than running 3-phase, power out.
Well, we talked several years ago when this issue was coming up. There are lots of places, probably all of us can think of a bunch of them, where there's a field right on the road, and there's a hedgerow, and then there's a backfield. And if they were in the backfield, they'd be naturally screened. And could we socialize the cost of running the wire from the road to that backfield? Or is it, and at the time the answer came back, no. I mean, there was not a will to do it.
How do you do that?
And because of cost, and that's like, okay, so if we were willing to spend more, we could push things to less visible locations.
Right.
But instead it was all on the developer and the developers. There, why do they want to spend extra
Well,
$150,000?
they don't, they're a profit-making business.
Right.
I mean, they're not a nonprofit. But I was thinking, compromise, towns are supposed to designate areas that would be suitable for cell towers and energy projects. We could say, if you develop in those areas, provided they aren't down some hollow and, as long as the towns have reasonable areas for you to develop it, then you don't need a permit. I mean, you know, if you're in there, or the criteria, you know, the aesthetic criteria doesn't hit.
Incentivize stuff to.
Yeah, incentivize, and we haven't done real well. I mean, we started, we hadn't done very well with getting towns to do that, and that was cell towers.
So I can't remember if the act number is right, 173, 6 years ago, more or less. When we said if your town, certified town plan is a certified town energy element that does just what you said.
Yeah.
We're willing to pull our share for our cleaning up.
Yeah,
And
We've already done that?
here's where you can do it, and then when you're in a PDC proceeding, your town is given substantial deference rather than due consideration. That was the whole incentive thing, of the towns be more influential and help develop it,
Yeah,
know where to go.
citizen doesn't understand the difference between due consideration and substantial deference. Those are legal terms, and I couldn't tell you the exact differences, but one is more consideration, yeah.
The
Okay.
simple analogy was it's like a teeter-totter. If it's due consideration, the decision is, you're gonna have to sort of override where the board's going. And if it's substantial deference, it's leaning your way, the town's
Yeah.
way,
The
and
town
the board's
is
gonna have to
given the benefit of the doubt.
over, because we said, you earned the right to have this power before the order.
So, we can do it up or down. Or we can try and find something to make it a little easier, but not rule out the public.
Mentioned yesterday, this is really very much, this conversation tracks the conversation about Act 250, that really are a pair of laws.
Yeah.
And I notice in both conversations, certain prejudices come up or assumptions as to who the people are who are objecting. And we often hear things about, some rich SOB who just is protecting his view. Or there's among people who like to see themselves as pragmatists and they'll see just the raising of aesthetics as an issue at all as a kind of silly concern. And I certainly, many times when I've heard someone talk about emotional arguments as opposed to scientific, and by emotional arguments, they mean arguments derived from values that they don't happen to share. I do not assume that a Vermonter intervening is by definition bad. Might be. I think there are selfish SOBs out there. I think there are people who have silly, flaky ideas. But I don't want to assume that that's what's going on every time a Vermonter says this. I think this is a bad idea. And as far as aesthetics, because I have some experience of dealing with this, aesthetic judgments ultimately are subjective, but that does not necessarily mean that they're arbitrary and capricious. Namely, someone can tell me my aesthetic judgment is subjective, but can't look me in the eye and tell me my judgment is wrong. That they agree with me, that actually pushed it. That is, yes, that's ugly. The other thing is the aesthetics is not simply a matter of avoiding ugly. It's a matter of protecting beautiful. I think that Manchester thing is that, the state is filled with places that are as aesthetically awkward, unpleasing as that looked in the renderings. But the point is that field is really quite beautiful and probably something you want to protect.
And I think our challenge is to find where to put those things, but they also need to be where there's three-phase power and you can get, we've got the bottleneck, and we did put an awful lot of those community solar projects up in the kingdom, and we've got the bottleneck and can't get the energy out of there. Somebody told me that would be fixed by 25. But if it's fixed, the bill is all on the ratepayers of this state. There's no ISO participation because it's our internal transmission. And, we need to find places, maybe when we're doing all the tier 1, 2, and 3 mapping, part of that should be, this is where it would be good to put solar right now. Windmills are a lot more controversial. I think they're beautiful, but I'm quite sure that there are vibrations that do have effects on humans. And so, yeah.
I think I agree with everything you just said, Senator McCormick. What I would then overlay it though with is I think every one of us knows that the voters care very deeply about the climate crisis that we're in. And so this is, if anything, a consideration to adopt in order to make it easier with less regulatory uncertainty and cost to get quiet, clean energy deployed in the hillsides. And so that's what I think why we're having this discussion.
Yeah, Senator Gray and I were just scolded for being opposed to solar power. Because
Yeah, I mean,
but I think actually the chair just answered your concern, which is that, and I have said to any time I've ever expressed sympathy for people with an aesthetic concern about solar or wind or red, is if you oppose this, you now have brought upon yourself the duty. If you're saying not here, you have a duty to say, well, then where? To answer the question.
Well, across from your house,
What's that?
across from your house, that's where it should be. As opposed to in front of my house.
No, well, I mean,
But that's basically what we do, isn't it?
well, you're talking about the imagined selfish SOB with lots of bucks. That's true. There are people who are guilty of
There's
that.
also the person who has a view and they've lived there, a long period of time. They enjoy waking up and looking out. The last thing to do is wake up and look out at a mountain of steel plates that are gonna be there for 20 years, and then you don't know what you're gonna do with them after that.
And that's, I would suggest that is at least in part a property interest.
Oh, sure.
That person is, well, that's a constitutional right, private property.
It is, but basically you don't buy and sell views.
okay.
Except the fact do.
Yeah, I used to buy the lot across from me, and I knew there were houses going up there, and they went up, and I no longer can see camels up. I knew that was going to happen, but I didn't have, I think it was $4,000 a lot back then. To buy the lots. So I could have bought them going in across the street, blocking my view. I think we all agreed that getting, and it's solar, because I don't think I'm gonna put windmills in under. I actually think they're beautiful, but I don't know that I want one thumping in my backyard.
I have one in my backyard.
Yours is little. You got this little thing.
Oh, yeah. There's an article I was reading earlier today, I don't even remember where I read it, it was a local publication though, about solar and some of the issues regarding solar. Among the things they were talking about is, of course, we do have a renewable industrial complex in Vermont.
Yes.
And a lot of the folks, what the article was alleging, who are investing in solar, they be local Vermont companies that you see with membership in the associations that write us. And that what they do is that once they're built, they sell them to out-of-state partnerships who have little or no interest in maintaining them. And they talk a little bit about some of the deterioration you see in solar, and that there are significant questions about end of life disposal of these, because those out-of-state real partnerships that are based solely on the profit, have
Take out.
little interest in the long-term solution.
And we are driven by the climate crisis, and it's been brought home hard and fast to us with the flooding. And it's trying to find the balance. The balance, this bill is saying we basically need to cut public participation out. You got traffic and you got safety. As long as these things are anchored to the ground, not gonna blow around, you haven't got any safety. And yes, if I could just go in and no neighbor could come in and say, look, that thing would be a lot better over the other side of the hill where no one can see it. On the other hand, the power companies want to be near the road so they can access it and near the three-phase power. And if we cut out essentially public participation, we get a lot of solar, or probably more faster and cheaper for the companies. But we would be risking, that something might be put up inappropriately, or, if phase 3 power is going down Route 7, that's probably where you might find some more of the big fields. And it's trying to find that balance. I'm not sure this is it.
Senator Brock, I'm not positive, but I think that, I know we had discussions years ago about end of life or arrays, and I think at a certain size, it might be 150 kW and up. You have to, exact, you have to bond or escrow, so there's a cleanup funds available. Double check for sure that that's still part of everything, though.
Whether or not there's any
We want to
inflationary trigger
Well, yeah.
in the bond, because the bond could be worthless based on current inflation
Yeah,
rates.
well, yeah, so revisiting might be improved, but I know that we were trying to address that to make sure we didn't have
I remember.
Yeah,
I
they're
remember
stranded
something about that.
and turn into very fancy garbage sitting in fields, kind of like the giant television dishes that you see with shrubs growing up all over.
My neighborhood is in discussion mode because Green Mountain Power wants to put our power lines underground. That gets them out of the woods where we've only lost power once. We never had any kind of a 24-hour outage. And they told us when they came to our house that there was going to be a big silver box, probably down in the corner of our yard, front yard. But the neighbors next door, they told them they were gonna have a big silver box, which you can't cover because they have to be able to access it. So that's 2 in the length of my yard. And so the neighborhood is having a little discussion about that because one silver box would be all right, but 2 silver boxes is starting to look ugly.
Maybe they can paint them forest green.
Now that was
Spray
not,
paint.
they're in the front yard. I mean, I figure I could just let my willow tree grow back around them, but, it's out of my sight line, looking out of my front. It's down there, it's out of that neighbor's sight line. But the one across, the one next to us, they're right on the road and it's 5 feet tall and 4 feet long and, has live electricity.
Well, wires are ugly too, except we're used to them. They all grow
They're
up
in
with
the,
them.
they're in the woods, you don't see them now,
We still got them in my house.
I
so.
wanna ask the committee something. If I were to, I'm not gonna waste the drafters' time. If I were to have legislation drafted that we could attach to one or another of these bills, to simply create an exploration of the state. Where do solar panels belong? Where are the sites where they would not be? And it's, in fact, just the question is, where are the sites where they would not be an aesthetic problem? Because I gotta tell you, I mean, just using common sense, but I don't have science, I'd like to get the science. My common sense tells me this beautiful state, for all of its beauty, is filled with specific sites that are actually quite ugly already.
I don't think,
And just,
I don't think you have to draft it, I think it's germane to this bill. We could just take this bill and I'd be A&R and Rev, and tell them to map, to agree, because businesses have things, they can't be running 3-phase power 10 miles up a dirt road to have it, be economical, but see if they can come out with some spots that would, and then we could perhaps accept those spots. We'd have to do a lot of talking with local people, but
I wanna see the narrative explaining what an ugly site is.
A place where there used to be a thriving factory,
Well,
has
what
been
I'm
sitting
saying
rotting
is
for
that
25
this is
years.
the
We're
problem
turning
that
that
we
into
have
housing.
with aesthetics as a criteria. For anything that we do right now, because it's in the eye of the beholder, people have different views.
I
At
sat
least,
in-
and particularly when they have financial interests involved, their views do tend to.
Well, whether, that's a point. Someone who's gonna make.
I sat one night at the planning commission and listened to the committee, I was part of them, arguing over whether or not this sign should be permitted as a black sign with white letters or a white sign with black letters. And I sat there and I finally, and this is when I was designing it, where I finally said, I am the only one that makes their living doing anything like design, and it doesn't make any difference.
That's right.
I mean, it was, you can get just in, and it is, at that level, it's just personal. And, but I think,
My personal often overlaps your personal, which overlaps Mark's personal.
yeah,
There are, I think, again, might be subjective. It is not, that does not necessarily mean it's arbitrary purchase. And the places that no one will be particularly adamant about protecting.
okay, I'm not hearing the votes to put this up for a vote right now. I mean, you're ready to vote to take off the aesthetic?
Oh, no, well, I could go that way, but I don't know what kind of mood you're in.
We've got till crossover, but we're gonna have to do. Ah, you like that there. Was there a black notebook? I haven't seen one. I think that's all, that's just been there, that's all that come, I'm picking up.
Part of my comfort share is that this is gonna go to the House where there's the continued conversation, so. But.
Pardon me, it's got the wrong.
I'm pretty sure Keisha, from what she said the other day, would be a yes.
I would be a no.
I think so. Senator McDonald.
I'm not, don't really set this.
Can't hear you, Mark.
I do not wish to remove aesthetics.
Okay.
My neighbor was mean to me, therefore I will put up a solar panel on my front lawn on his boundary.
A very large fence,
That was cell towers.
take back from home.
On my line on the neighbor's property, I look at it, he's over the other side of the hill. And what it was. Where are you leaning?
Well, I'm, interesting. Yeah, I'd like to know more. I mean, I feel like we had a couple anecdotes and I don't feel like I have a very good grasp of, I mean, you did remind me of what Mr. Faber said, like that you can only think of one, so then it puzzles me why people are feeling like this is important enough to pick a bill and change the law.
Annette Smith put. She sent me an email, so I'm assuming she sent everyone with a list of PUC decisions. So it's down there somewhere, I'll find it if you didn't all get it. And we'll take a look at that. I don't think it's that I think it's just that it allows people to get involved. It's not how the decision is decided. It just slows down the process. I think it's the slowing of the process, because then you can appeal, and the same thing we're finding with housing. It's the more people that have a say, the longer it is, you know, it takes more time, and time is money for a business. I think the balance we're getting is how much input do people get, you know, and these are our neighbors.
Well, I know there's some people very strong views on it and some, but I should follow up, at least privately, ask them to explain it to me again.
Okay.
She and Dingle Dean were there on the same time that I came to which one said which.
Dingle Dean
But
was,
if you do it right,
was against the change.
Yeah, if you do the,
And
if you have the planning right or the criteria correct, then it works. If you say should instead of shall, you
yeah,
got a problem.
well, we have that. We have small communities making decisions, and as Brooke says, they don't have the information, they don't know what the process is. And yeah, I mean, it's one of the back things of being a small state. We have very small local governments, and they don't have a lot of backup staff. They don't have much counsel. Okay, so maybe we will have Rev come back in here and tell us what the problem really is. If we're to believe that PUC aesthetics is not the problem, the rulings on aesthetics is not the problem. I think it's the time involved in doing it. And the question is, do we want? I mean, the PUC will consider aesthetics, but the neighbors won't be able to get a foot in the door. So, that's it. Okay, I think, yeah.
That we, question has come up now that those of us who don't want to remove the aesthetics, are trying to stop solar collectors. But for 50 years, you've also heard the people who want to keep the aesthetics criteria are anti-business. And I would say, first of all, that I've already said it on the solar collectors, it's not a matter of saying, don't put them any place, it's saying, if not here, where? And as far as business, you know, the primary business of the American people is do business. But even Coolidge did claim that it's the only business of the American people. And that doing business is done in the context of other values.
Okay, so we will, if anybody thinks of anybody they'd like to hear from, let me know. I will ask Rev, to come in and talk to us about what is, you know, is the problem, because we're being told things aren't being decided on aesthetics, is that the problem, or is it that people intervening on aesthetics slow down the process?
But that it's a too permissive, way to intervene. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would also be, helpful for somebody to explain. We went through a whole, thoughtful, methodical, plan, siting strategy, went through the law. And I don't know how well it's working, you know, the whole community-based energy siting. And to your point, like if you're building in that zone, if you're building where a town has said we want it to happen,
I don't think there's anything like it.
where we'll tolerate that.
Yes.
Is there any easing of the review, because you've been, they directed you to a spot, however, begrudgingly not, and now the developer goes to that.
Yeah, I think what we will have to do is make sure that the towns have a spot that, you know, isn't down in the bottom of the hollow where, you know, with a one-lane dirt road going down there, that they have a realistic piece of land on which they can tolerate solar panels. And I think we should leave windmills out.
Right, they even sort of game the system by giving you a healthy place to go.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
Yeah. Or we can ask natural resources, whoever we do it in the state, and the electricity, the solar companies to develop a map on where it would be appropriate to put solar, and if you put it there, there's no,
The utilities example, some, they have maps showing where in their systems. They can add more solar and where they can't without upgrades. Remember, like
yes,
GMP is a map, Addison County is. And probably Chittenden County, like largely, I don't remember, a lot of red lines on those maps. And it means that other than like residential level solar for your home, they are not looking, I don't know.
they max out, no, they're doing a lot of battery storage, I mean, you get, and they use it when it's 99 degrees in July, and Boston is sucking up all the other power, and it's very expensive. We use our solar then that we've stored, but there are limits and there are transmission limits. And I assume the PUC hears from the utilities and whether or not they can get the electricity out of there, but we have had a bad incident, with our little dog leg where we can't get the windmill energy out. And that was hard fought to have it never work.
Before we adjourn, just,
Yes,
I don't know if the sun lines up well for it. But just in terms of, is this a site that you wouldn't mind aesthetically putting up, collectors? Right out there at that big parking lot.
oh, yeah. We could put,
It'd be a good spot, right?
Be a great spot. It's already open.
that's,
It's already impermeable, so already great stormwater.
That's
well,
okay.
we have a lot of state parking lots and a lot of big high state buildings.
Yeah.
Keeps
But
snow
solar
for
for-
We should put them
all
up,
the summer.
but that's just nothing in the bucket, that's a drip
That's big.
compared to what they want to build. And they will build it as long as it's profitable, and they will sell it.
So I'm a big fan of that. One thing I think that we could make it more attractive, and I'm gonna get myself in trouble, but I'm just spitballing here. Is if we did assess parking spots in this state and you could get that assessment waived if your parking spot was covered. Or at least public.
Yeah.
But if you have private parking spaces that aren't covered with solar panels or underground, then you pay a fee, and that could motivate, create the right incentive to have people pay for the additional structures to put the solar panels over the parking lots, which also provides shielding from the sun and the rain. I'd love to explore this more.
And they're doing it already in France.
They are.
Okay, so it's not like it's pipe.
We had, there was a bill and it would have the co-op has solar panels over some covered parking lots. But they wanted to allow, not that there would be no contest, you could put it in but towns have also, some of those parking, Walmart's in downtown Rutland. And it was the St. Albans Sports Center. They wanted to be able to put them out so they'd hang over the street. There was some big incident. It, like all things, it needs to be well planned. And for a couple of years, the only place you could put solar was former landfills, roofs, and parking lots. And we didn't build much solar, and the solar companies were not happy.
Well, I think it is not the cheapest way to do it.
Yeah.
Because, for example, on roofs is that they're heavy.
Yeah.
And so that it would involve some.
Plow trucks, you gotta get them up really high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
But,
My wife has done it. Their roof is, solar.
But then it's a matter of weighing this disadvantage off against that disadvantage.
I think we're gonna have to end for the day. I think it's pretty short tomorrow. We'll get as many people in as we can next week, but we're gonna have to start voting some of these out But we're gonna be back to tax and candy. And, yeah, and a lot of it is coming down to what it's gonna cost the obesity. Any thoughts on that? I think we sent you all the email from Sarah Teachow, it was from the New York Times, about what the expense of the diet drugs are doing. And one was the state employees union that put a $20,000 lifetime limit on what you can get. Pharmaceuticals are the biggest cost driver in
Well, under Rule 74, I have an obvious conflict of interest.
many of us do. But, you know, we'll see where it goes.
I love it.
Well, both insurance covers it.
Does it make you not have an appetite or it makes
It
you,
makes
you can eat and not get?
I've been told that you feel really bad if you eat too much. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, but apparently they work whether or not you change your lifestyle, which means if you go off and you haven't changed your lifestyle, then your appetite is back and you do the weight fluctuation thing. So, you know, there is possibility that we will save money down the road if we will save as much as we will pay. Who knows, but the cost will be now, and I was talking to Nolan this morning, he said, but you can't book future savings until you actually save them.
Yeah.
So it will be an expense for now. Okay, we're done.